I'm delighted to welcome Professor Dick Arnes from the Erasmus University in Rotterdam, and he's going to be talking to us on shrine politics in the Middle East, holy sites, public space, and violence. And I think those of us that have worked in other parts of the world in the Middle East will also recognise that contestation and politics are central to all attempts to organise devotion, and you can't avoid it. I'm looking forward to hearing about the position in Syria, in the Middle East. Professor Arnes originally was a student of Arabic language and culture at Nijmegen University in the Netherlands, received his PhD in 1993 from the same university, and has lectured previously at the universities of Nijmegen and Leiden. And many of us, of course, will be familiar with the ISIM program and the ISIM newsletter that was such a valuable part of our world. And he was the academic coordinator and later on the executive director of that program. And since 2006, he has been Professor of History of Non-Western Societies with particular reference to the Middle East at the Erasmus School of History, Culture and Communication at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. So his publications have been on late Ottoman history in Syria and on religious plurality in the Middle East, as well as on Muslims in Western Europe. And he's also a close colleague of our director, Leif Stenberg, who unfortunately is in Norway, who otherwise would have been chairing today's event. So if I could welcome Professor Arnes and invite you to his presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome to you all. I'm a Dutchman. Lecture will be English. The name of my chair has been reformulated happily to global history, so it's no longer a global term. Okay, today I want to talk about shrine culture and shrine politics, and I will start with a little bit of prehistory of this project. Because I was trained in a sort of text-oriented tradition, in which you were taught to believe that texts speak for themselves. And then I found out that some texts don't speak, and that some texts were maybe produced in Syria, but not read by anyone. And that was particularly the sort of literature which was produced by, mainly by Alawite scholars, mainly secular scholars, who were writing about what is Alawiyya, what do we believe. And this was, of course, a sort of discourse which was basically dates back to the 1970s, in which it is connected to the Jafariya thought school and connected to, let's say, more mainstream Shia. Whether this is true or not, it's, of course, belief is a matter of believing. But what struck me is that it was a production of these books. You could find them in shops. You did not find them in houses, or hardly. They were only read by PhD candidates from Europe and North America, and they were producing PhD theses on that. And I was really wondering what the value of these texts was, and I was really thinking this is a symbolic production of books. And so, I was curious about, let's say, daily religiosity, particularly also for younger generations of several groups in the area, Syria and Lebanon. And so I thought, well, what is a way to find out, to get a different angle on religiosity and also on religious identity? Because like the Ismaili community or the Alawi communities, they are often described as being highly secular, but still you're Ismaili or Alawi. And so what is that identity marker exactly? And how does that relate to a religious tradition of that type of works? So I did start research in the Alawite region. Of course, I did not ask permission for this research, because I would never have got it. So I went visiting shrines. and I was nearly always welcomed very warmly. Sometimes there was a little bit of suspicion, especially when the keeper of the shrine was a retired general in the army. And so, and they were suspicious because also I lived for a while in Tel Aviv, and so I sometimes have this sort of and so I may have been a spy type of. I would be the ideal spy, knowing local vernaculars and being a rare visitor, giving my European, given the fact that I'm from Western Europe. And interesting, what I also find out in general is that, and I noticed that earlier in Lebanon as well as in Syria, that shrines have become more popular compared to the recent past. And in particularly Shiites and Christians in Syria, they were rebuilding and extending their shrines. And this has to do also with the phenomenon of religious tourism. And of course that was massive from Iran, since the Iran-Iraq war. But it also became the sort of homeland diasporic tourism of the, say, Christian diaspora, Syrian Christian diaspora in America. And they invested quite a bit in all sorts of facilities. So I started this research, and then the war came to Syria. So doing field work like this is, of course, no longer possible. It will not be for a long period of time, particularly not in the Alawite region. In Lebanon, I can continue, but then something happened, of course, that we get the war on shrines. And many shrines have been destroyed over the last few years. And of course, here in Europe, we cared most about Palmyra, especially the Baal temple. And of course, that was, well, that is a great pity that it has been destroyed, but it was a secular shrine. There are many living shrines which has been destroyed as well. And so what I did, getting the student assistants, I'm now mapping, like the archaeologists all are mapping destroyed archaeological sites. I have this project of mapping all sort of living religious sites which have been destroyed during the war, also in Iraq. And it's quite immense what happened, and it's hit all communities. And it's one of the specific aspects of the wars in both countries. So that is basically the background of my study. Of course, I studied earlier, or also in the Ismaili community, especially in late Ottoman times. And so I've been quite a bit in Saramiya and the Shah Qaboos and other Ismaili cities and villages, including Khawabi, of the best members of Khawabi area, which is above Tartus. Very nice, it's one of the nicest coastal areas. Okay, my lecture feeds into diversity and sectarianism. The two cannot be divided currently. Quite often people in the Netherlands tell me, well, those people in the Middle East, they are always fighting. And then I say, well, they're not always fighting. And I point to the fact that the Middle East is religiously more diverse than Europe. And that, say, what we call sectarianism nowadays is basically a modern phenomenon in many aspects. It feeds on certain existing hierarchies of the past and certain differences. But in many of its appearances, it is modern. It has to do with the nation state, with citizenship rights, with political rights. It has become much more political. Religious identity has become more political in a way. Of course, traditional hierarchy still exists, also in Syria. You have a hierarchy in which Sunni Islam is still on top of the hierarchy. It's public religion in a way, but also especially in legal aspects. You see that there's still, of course, family law and the associated legal arrangements. You see that there is a hierarchy. And that's Ismailis, Alawis don't have their own family. The Druze have, but it has to do with the fact that they came from Lebanon and they were attached to Hasbaya. The Jews of Suwaida were attached to Hasbaya in Lebanon, and they claimed and they campaigned successfully to continue that bond and not to be part of Kunaitra, with the idea of first, because the Kunaitra is a Sunni, Kunaitra court would be a Sunni Muslim court. And so the Druze are the exception, and of course Christians also have their own legal arrangements. The Lebanon situation is very different. Lebanon knows no less than 18 formally recognized communities who have all the right of representation and all the rights on their specific legal, family-related legal arrangements. Diversity in Islam, well, I think you know, but I more or less, maybe my old colleague Sam today that can also comment on this. How would you define the difference, the diversity within Islam? It's huge, of course, like diversity in Christianity is huge. In Jewish tradition, diversity is huge. So religions are diverse, all. Even if they have claims of a certain wahda, unity, tawheed, perhaps you see, of course, religion is not only about God; it's also about people dealing with life and all matters of what are important. Now, of course, you have the law-oriented mainstream within Islam, in which the law, the religious law, has a central position. We find that amongst the Sunnah, Shia, Zaydi, Ibadiyya. And then we have basically in this number two. Oh, this one. Sorry, I was thinking that you were seeing slides, but you're not. Let me do it like this. This one. Okay. So you have the law-oriented, family-oriented traditions. We quite often see this as formal Islam. It's an important stream. Some are more consensus-based. The tradition of Ijma is very strong. I got in the Sunnah and Ibadiyya even more. Then you have the charismatic emanate traditions. They can be law-oriented, like in Shia tradition, but there is the idea of the charismatic imam. And then you have charismatic, more esoteric traditions. And the most extreme form of it is Bashar. These are Muslims in India. Ba means without. In Hindi, so we are without Sharia. They call themselves without Sharia. So that's the most extreme. Of course, there's a lot of variation in between. And we should also not forget, and that is particularly when you look at shrine culture is much more overlapping. But the veneration of saints and shrines is very much contested, but it's also a continuity and something which the various groups, not only within Islam, but also with Christians and Jews, have in common. If there would be a sort of general marker of the broad religious atmosphere in the area, it would be, some would say, monotheism, perhaps. But in daily devotion, in traditional Islam, in traditional Christianity, shrines, saints were very central. Not only in rural areas, also in urban areas. Okay. Okay, so we talked already a little bit about the hierarchy, about the idea of public religion. It's taken from Casanova, not Italian lover. but this man Casanova, who wrote a very important book on Catholicism in Poland, very influential, the idea of public religion. It has to do with visibility, and what you see in Syria, for instance, that some groups are more visible when you look at real structures, mosques, churches, monasteries, shrines. And particularly in cities, these are either Sunni Muslims or Christian. Perhaps some Jewish, but not Alawi, not Ismaili, not Druze. Notwithstanding the fact that you have large-scale urbanizations, and that many, for say, Alawis live in western Damascus, their shrines are not there. But their structures, the religious structures, are in rural areas. Yeah, so the visibility of certain communities way less compared to others. And that has to do with certain hierarchies, but also with the fact that certain traditions were basically, in fact, mainly rural and not urban. And that urbanization is a relatively recent phenomenon. This is the ethnic religious map of the Middle East in the 1990s, late 1990s. When you would go back 1 century earlier, it would even be more diverse and more scattered. You see already processes of certain groups moving to larger villages and towns. Ismailis are good examples. Where you see already from the second half of the 19th century that Ismailis are leaving smaller places in the north of Lebanon or in the Antakya area or in Lisbon. And they move to either Moose, Nasraf, and also increasingly to Salamiyya and the area. Okay, so there's a concentration. You see the same for Druze, but still you have pockets of Druze. So this is a Druze pocket to the north. Now it's ethnically cleansed. And nearly all Druze have left for Sueda, because the area is still under control of the Al-Qaeda branch in Syria. And then, of course, as you know, there are many negotiations and exchanges of populations from rebel areas to certain areas, which in fact is also the cleansing this happening. And a greater concentration of certain groups within one locality. And so it's less mixed, becoming less mixed. Still, it's hugely diverse, and more diverse than anything if you go to Europe. Perhaps the Caucasus is similar, but it's quite unique to be still in the Middle East. Saints and shrines. It's a rich tradition in the Middle East. Many places are sacred, and the number of shrines is huge. In the Alawite regions, we have thousands of shrines. Some very simple, and a simple holy place. And if you look at real structures, you get maybe 400, 500, 600 shrines. And many villages have 3 shrines, very small ones, of saintly persons. Some of them are remembered, sometimes they're not remembered. If you ask them who was he? Jetman, one of our forefathers. Yeah? And so that is. You have, of course, a number of very important shrines, and I think Syria has not that many. Yeah? But Zainab is certainly one. It does not compare to Mecca and Medina, perhaps, no, but it became some sort of the Syrian alternative for Kaaba. And during the war, there was also all sort of mechanisms I referred to later on, which stresses the importance of the shrines for a particular Shiite. And this is also, and I also noticed that in the Alawite community, more people are visiting shrines already from the 1990s onwards. And especially, of course, on Fridays, because it's also a meeting place for family and friends. And where you offer something and then you have a barbecue. And you sit in the shades of holy trees. Holy trees are very important. And they are always near to shrines. But the Ismailis, of course, the Ismailis have very few shrines. But this is a new one built above Masjid. And it's built by the community of Masjid, which is not, and especially those who are not following the Yahya. I'm not totally familiar with what happened to Ismaili shrines in Syria, but I know that from the Aga Khan, from the 1920s onwards, it was discarded. And some were removed. Ismailis continued to go to some larger shrines, but those were not necessarily part of a Ismaili Waqf foundation, but of a Alawi or Sunni or whatever. So this is a new one, and one thing that Rashid ad-Din, the old man of the mountain, the leader of the Assassins, it was buried there. Of course, we don't know. And to make sure they also, because you have at least two holy entities in the area. This is very recent, but it's a sign that shrine culture is becoming part of identity politics. And these are younger people who do this, not the elderly. Shrine politics, the shrine culture and shrine politics, of course, they are intertwined. But like I said before, for defining religious identity and ethnic identity, it's important. It's also part of heritage politics, especially for migrants and religious tourists, agriculture. It's have become symbols of belonging in conflict situations. That was clearly visible during the war. And as a result, it became targets also during the war. There are several armed groups, either to protect them or to destroy them. And destroying shrines is part of identity politics as well, as much as protecting them. Because basically, if you destroy a shrine, you take away the sort of religious sacred entity from a village or from a town, and leaving the people without that. Of course, it basically means holy. I'll get back to that. So now we get to the illustrations, and we have a number of types of shrines. Look, and they're not static categories. But you have the traditional, I would say, Sha'bi, popular shrines. Then you have heritage shrines. Then you have modernized shrines, and modernized maybe not the good word, but these are the sort of shrines in which you see that there's a policy of discouraging certain rituals, or forbidding them altogether. And then, of course, we have this, the shrines like Sayyidina Zainab, for instance, which have become a center of militancy, Shiite militancy. Okay, shared sacredness. The shrines used to be visited, and some still are, by people from various communities. So they were not. But there is a process going on to make shrines specifically Alawi or specifically Suryani or whatever. And that people carve out their own shrine spaces and build new ones. In the past, there was much more overlapping. This is a very unique one, very rare one from Lebanon. And what are we seeing here? Is a quiz. What type of shrine would this be?
Christian?
Yeah, that's what they think, but it's not Christian, it's Shiite. And because the rosaries are Muslim rosaries. And of course, these are China-made copies of Maria from Lourdes, France. But it is a shrine situated in an olive tree in a very small village in Lebanon, in the Beqaa Mountains. The village is called Sayyidna. That's her. And it used to be a mixed village. It was partly Shiite, partly Christians. But all Christians migrated either to Beirut or Montreal or whatever, and the Shiite continued until today. Not until I visited it, together with a colleague from Saint Joseph, politician. But I noticed that there was already, there's a small visitor center next to it, and there I saw a placard with a sort of prayer to Fatima. So there is a process of how to say that, of dedicating the shrine to Fatima. Not the most famous Fatima, the second famous. And that is something which is really quite common historically. Places remain holy, and saints come and go. So that's also not unique. And that's of course to do with the populations and their particular traditions. So this is an example of a traditional shrine, Nabi Khidr, not far away from Safiqa. It's one of the largest Khidr shrines. Are you familiar who Khidr is? Khidr is the most famous Muslim saint of the broader region. He's called the Green. Now there's some overlap with St. George and St. Elijah. Because some places are called, are identified by Muslims as being dedicated to Khidr, and Christians who say, no, it's not Jurjus, it's St. George, the dragon killer. And also Ilyas, there's an overlap. And a good example of that is in Anatolia, the most important saint is called Khidr Ilyas. He's Russian. So I took this picture. It looks a little bit mystified, but that's also, I did not want to disturb people too much. So basically, this is a bad picture. This is quite interesting. Here you can see why it's shabby. It's an old traditional shrine. It's salt. Salt is a witchcraft thing. The scissor is to cut a piece of cloth from it. There are blessing stones. When you put them on the shrine in order to, like your mobile, you have to feed it with electricity, and blessing stones have to be filled with barakah. That would keep power to heal. Not because you use it, and then you have a really sore back, you would lie on the floor and people would roll kindly these stones over there. And then you put it back in the stones. These are Qurans, but also a picture of people, not people who are maybe hospitalized or something. So that is a very common shrine. And this is the most popular Khidr shrine in the southern Jibal al-Arabiyyin. And you see people are begging. You can buy the chicken at the entrance, you offer it, and then you eat it. And if there's something big, then you can also buy a goat or a lamb and do the same. So part of the money goes to the foundation of the shrine. And shrines are quite often on hilltops or in valleys. Trees are considered to be holy as well, so they're shady. And you have this wonderful view of the olive orchards of the southern Elamite region. This is another Sha'abi shrine, one in Iraq, close to Zahle in Lebanon. Dedicated to Noah. It's 26 meters long. And because there is this old tradition that saints were giants. So there are a number of particularly Sha'abi shrines with these sort of huge sort of shrines. What is interesting of this one cannot be seen well, but they're still burning candles. It's a Shiite shrine. And that is being discouraged in the Shiite community in Lebanon because burning candles is nowadays considered to be too Christian. So a real proper 12 Shiite would not do that too much. This is one close to Al-Qarmouz, dedicated to Mahmoud al-Qusayr. It's also a huge shrine. And when you enter the shrine, it says, well, it's forbidden to take alcoholic drinks. You don't put it on the wall if people don't do that. And the funny thing is, when you go down the stairs and into the premises of the shrine, the first thing you can buy is beer. Because beer is not considered to be alcohol. And it's also in Austria, people don't drink a beer with alcohol. You have it for breakfast. You don't here. But yes, the issue is, of course, that within Alawite traditions, some rituals, a little bit of arak is used. They're like wine in the Christian tradition. And that is something which also in Alawite shrine nowadays is being discouraged. Because there is a trend to make it more orthodox. And that's the reason why certain rituals like the use of arak, like burning Bahura, it's too Christian as well. Like burning candles, too Christian. Like sword, pagan, basically. But these things are illegal. Also interesting is that these, of course, these are Alawi scholars. So basically, they call them scholars nowadays. Ulama al-Alawi. They used to be called, like in the traditional Israeli tradition, Mashayikh ad-Din. So sheikhs. So I asked, oh, these are the Mashayikh, Ulama. And also the types of books they are producing. They look like books which are traditionally produced within the Sunni and 12 Shia traditions. And of course, as you perhaps also know, a shrine is also a place of leisure. You can buy all sorts of things, also toys for children. You have nice meals. So a shrine is also basically a sort of community center. And has gained importance also in that function. There are many people go to the shrine, only few to the premises, only few enter the actual shrine. And some do, because husband may be hospitalized, you want to become pregnant, problematic, or whatever. And that are basically the sort of reasons why you enter the shrine. It looks like a Druze, it is a Druze. This is a Druze shrine close to Damascus, dedicated to Abel, Habib. That's a large one. It's a very interesting one because this one has been, this is a clear example of a modernized shrine. These are Druze women. I think in Druze traditions, it's basically younger women would not have higher hairscarf, but older women quite often have. Interestingly, also in Nabi Khidr and others, young women would go into the shrine without a hairscarf. But here, you're not allowed. And you have the same sort of cloth you get when you want to visit the Umayyad mosque in Damascus. It's a female. It's a black abaya type of cloth enter. This is because the shrine has become popular with Iranian pilgrims. They come in, they bust in after they have visited the Zainab, that's another place in Damascus, where they have outing and they go to this place and they go to Beirut. And there's a huge market, a cloth market, and they come in. And so the shrine has been reorganized, basically. It's still a Druze one. Whereas the Druze village disappeared. The village is still there. The Druze are no longer living there. But the rock, the foundation, is still good. And of course you make selfies. Also, this is a very long, 7 meters long shrine of 26. This is a fancy shrine, and also an example of how when there's too much intervention into a shrine, it loses its sacred function. This is Kafroon, a mixed Arabic Christian village. There's a holy spring behind the shrine. There's very good restaurants over there. You can have fish from the holy water, very tasty fish, and very fresh because the restaurant, maybe some of you have ever been there. Basically, you are sitting in the river, more or less, or in the stream, not really the river. Now this, a rich Alawite migrant in Australia invested in this shrine. And he thought it a good idea to make it more modern and more, well, let's give it a new outlook. And then they put this on it. And that is not Arabic, that's Torah Shia. Like, these are the 12 Imams, Ali and Fatima. And that is not part of the Alawite tradition in this way. It's also copycatting a little bit the Iranian examples, because the Iranian government has invested hugely in all sorts of shrines. So you see here where the examples come from, but it's atypical for the teaching. What they did is take off the tradition, the religious poetry, which is very much part and parcel of the Alawite tradition, like it is of the Ismaili tradition. Traditional Mashayikh ad-Din, the Ismaili tradition, and the Alawi tradition, the main activity was producing poetry lines. And these sort of, was also this in the 20s and the 30s, they started to put to decorate shrines with poetry. There was also an innovation at that time. This is a very interesting shrine in Dakar Valley. It's partly financed by the Iranian government. It's totally redone. It's very modern. It has a very good slaughterhouse next to it. Very modern. So it's very easy. You can do it in a very clean way to have your animals slaughtered. It's a shrine in which a number of rituals have been discouraged, like the use of Bakhura, burning candles. But you see that people come up with new rituals. As they link locks to the shrine, and you make a bow. You attach a lock to the shrine, and shoot the saint that gives his or her barakah. But then you go back to the shrine and you take off the lock. There should not be too many locks in the shrine, because otherwise this saint is not very effective. And the efficacy of saints is still important. Some shrines are known to be very good, the proper place to go if you really, really want to become effective. And so people who go there, in Lebanon that's a shrine dedicated, not this one, to Maria. Many people go there, many Muslims as well. And you first go to a local shrine, it doesn't work, then you go to a regional shrine, and then, okay, let's go to the Maryland shrine. Yeah, because I heard that is a very effective shrine. This is a heritage shrine. It's in Mar Ilyas, so it's to the north of Damascus. This is the original shrine. It's one of the many caves in the Middle East in which there is a claim that Nabi Khidr, Elijah, a famous prophet from the Old Testament, lived there for a while when he was fed by ravens. This is this should be 19th to 20th century extensions to the shrine, and this is just prior to war. So we see huge investments in hotels, in new church, on top of the mountain in which the cave is located. I'm not sure what the conditions are right now, but this was in 2009. Huge investment from the Christian diaspora in the United States and in Argentina and Mexico. And then one more. And that will be again also the closure of this presentation. There's a lot of collateral damage, of course. And if you see the very sad pictures of homes, so much is destroyed by many, many parties, but some parties more than others, like the Nizam perhaps, but also like the Americans and the Russians. Also the Americans have bombarded extensively on Raqqa and other places. The state and non-state violence. There are many wars in Syria. It's not one war. It's not. Some people call it always a civil war. It's much more than a civil war. Many proxy wars are fought in Syria. And then, of course, there's symbolic violence. You have Salafist iconoclasts with shrine militia, and this is a famous example of it. Sayyidina Zainab, southern suburb of Damascus. It has been totally renovated by the Iranian government. That I would say. This was Iranian. It has this typical Iranian bling bling, with gold and everything shining and lots of beautiful mosaic. It used to be a Sunni shrine, but it was taken in the early 80s by the government, given more or less to Iran. So that's also interesting. It was the town, suburb, was mixed. It's no longer mixed. It's called Shii, but it's mixed in another way. Meaning that Shiites from all over the area have flocked to Sayyidina Zainab. Sayyidina Zainab has been the target of attacks many times, including the pilgrims, visiting them. The last one was earlier this year, in March, I think, when there was an bomb attack on pilgrims who were heading to Zainab in Damascus, close to the old city. Only, I think, 4 to 5 miles away is Yarmouk, which is still partly under control of a group attached itself to the Islamic State, but also to other groups. This is the suicide attack in March in Damascus. And this is an example of militia flocking into the area. It's not only Hezbollah. These are Shiites from Pakistan. Ya Zainab. That's basically what they say. Because that's the idea that Zainab, daughter of Hussein, together with Hussein, who died, of course, in the Battle of Karbala, his head was transferred to Damascus. She was transferred to Damascus. He died, became a holy person. There are 2 big shrines dedicated to her, one in Damascus, one in Egypt, of course. And you see that nowadays the slogan is, we will now protect you. Unlike the Battle of Karbala, we failed as a community to protect Hussein, to protect Zainab, now we will protect. So there's an example. There's also the other militias, like the Fatimiyin. But the Fatimiyin are from Afghanistan. And these are 12 Shiites from Pakistan, many probably of Ismaili origin. That was in the 19th or early 20th century, quite a number of Ismailis in then India changed from Ismailism to Shias, following certain disputes. So this is a famous one. This was also a shrine, totally renovated and reconstructed basically by the Iranian government. And this was close to Raqqa, so it was totally destroyed. This is, of course, Palmyra. This is the Baal shrine. This one is interesting. This final slide. This shrine is dedicated to Sheikh Mohammed al-Qaboul. He is actually quite important sheikh in the old tradition, but it's also an archaeological site dedicated to Baal. So here is a nice example that this place is already sacred for a very long time. It had been dedicated to Baal, and then another tradition basically took over the shrine, like the example of the transfer from Maria to Fatima. You have here a transfer to Muhammad. That's an indication of the longevity of sacredness and the fact that saints are blessed by. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we've got 15 minutes for questions. I'd like also to welcome the people who are online and invite them to send questions in. Could you say something about who owns the shrines, who manages the shrines?
Yes, shrines are part of the Waqf. So it's an Islamic foundation, very general legal constructs. All communities have Waqf properties. So that properties could be shops, or could be land or orchards. From the income of land or produce, that's basically spent for the upkeep and the salaries of people who guard over the shrines. So these are Shari'i regulations, and they apply to everyone. So you have Alawi Waqf, you have Ismaili Waqf, you have Druze Waqf, Christian Waqf.
But the managers of the shrines are hereditary, more or less, from father to son?
That's not always clear to me. Interestingly, in the Alawite region, they make a difference between Baathi shrines and non-Baathi shrines. The last one, the one without the alcohol, is a Baathi shrine. When you enter the shrine, it's a bit shocking. They try to make it more orthodox, but then they build a mihrab in the shrine, which is not usual. It's not a prayer room. That would be attached next to it. And then you have the mihrab, that's a direction from Mecca, and then Hafez al-Assad, Bashar al-Assad, and Nasrallah. So for any non-Alawi, this would be some sort of an insult. No, but so that's the Baathi shrine. There's strong connections with the Baathi. Nabi Khidr, the other one, the more Shadi one, it's not a Baathi shrine. Of course, at the outside of the shrine, you would have pictures of the president, which you have everywhere. But inside, that would be also within that tradition would be unthinkable. They are not holy as well.
Okay, so first, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. My name is I just wanted to ask you, what's the main route for making shrines as a route for sectarianism and politics? Because from my knowledge, as far as I know from Central Asia, after the perestroika of Gorbachev, shrines were the main tools open for religion. Because in perestroika time, the first thing that, investigation, renovation of shrines became started. And then in 1995, suddenly academic people said that the shrine doesn't play a great role in our faith. So, and again, after 2000, it became again popular, but it never was part of, sectarianism. Because according to the Russian scholar from St. Peter's, Rakhimov, there are in Tajikistan 41 this large shrines, and 38 of them are belonging to Shia, although majority are Sunnis in Tajikistan. So they never were part of politics and sectarianism.
Yeah. It's a process that started basically in the 19th century. A good example is the big shrine of Mar Jurjus, in the monastery of Mar Jurjus in Wadi Nasara, so the southern part of the Alawite region. We know from older ethnographic research documentation that on the festival day of Mar Ilyas, nearly all villages sent people to the shrine. Sunni, Prophet, Shiite, Ismaili, Alawi, Christian. And then we have later reports, and then the Sunnites and the Prophet Shiites are no longer there. They moved. And if you go nowadays, it's mainly Christian. It's become heritage. Perhaps sometimes an Alawi would come, but no. So there's a long process of basically disentangling and basically making specific claims for that shrine is typically Sunni or Christian or Alawi. And that basically people are separated there. And there is less common communality. So that's basically the process. And when you then have other sectarian processes, like in the war, and you have sectarian engineers who are really put in the sectarian card and play it, then shrines become, let's say, podia, teachers of sectarianism.
Is this on? Yes. Hello, thank you for your presentation. This kind of goes back to your earlier work, as my doctoral work looks at late Ottoman, Greater Syrian Ismailis. So I was wondering, but to do with shrines and their usage, I was wondering if you'd come across, as you just mentioned actually, intercommunal usage of shrines, for example. They have, I think, in Al-Harif and Aliyah, and also in Masyaf, they have Musaid Alawi shrines that Ismailis have kept or used. I wonder in your research, if you can remember that, what type of sources you used to perhaps gain this information? Were they, Sijilat al-Sharia or deeds or whatnot?
Well, deeds will tell you little about the visitors, and that is sometimes a problem. Now you really depend on reports of either in Arabic or French or German. And of course, you have this large projects of mapping the area, mainly from Western Europe and from America, also looking for the roots of Christianity. And then they started studying popular devotion, including the shrine culture. It was the time that they saw Alawites as little Christians, Nasara and Musayr. That does not make sense in Arabic, but it made sense for some people in Europe and the States. So we have reports from there. We also have some Ottoman reports. Shari reports would be basically legal. So they deal with ownership, with rents, with payments. And if it is a Christian waqf or a Sunni waqf, it's all Sunni, all Christian. But many examples still all over the area of shared devotions when it comes to shrines. Istanbul is a famous one. In Lebanon and many, some in Egypt, I'm sure in Iraq as well. There are in Palestine, Israel, especially many of these shrines dedicated to Ilyas have also become very popular among Israelis. There's a big shrine dedicated to Ilyas in Jordan, and after the peace agreement between Israel and Jordan, there's massive tourism from Israel to this shrine. They did not go only for Petra, no, they also go for this one. And to the extent that locals no longer go. So sometimes also a matter of politics. But there's still many examples.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Dick. That's fascinating. There's so many questions and issues. We haven't got time. But I just want to say, first of all, about Khidr Ilyas. It's an important figure for the Jews in Iraq, for instance. So the circumcision ceremony was conducted on a chair which was brought from the synagogue, which was called Kursi Khidr Ilyas. And the other thing about Khidr Ilyas is that, obviously you have spoken about this, that this kind of popular religious beliefs and practices, mostly practices, are also common among Sunnis. And indeed, in Anatolia, the legend of Mar Ilyas is very important. There are days in the year which they commemorated. And some people believe in Mar Ilyas as one character, and others say, no, they are brothers, Khidr and Ilyas. And once a year they get together, and that's the day in which you do that. But in general, I think it's among Sunnis, it's really all these beliefs are also very common. You know, I was struck, for instance, in Istanbul, in the Ayub shrine. You know, there is a list on the Ayub shrine. What is forbidden, and what's forbidden are all, you know, you mustn't sacrifice a chicken, you mustn't tie a rag, you mustn't do this, you mustn't do that, all the things that people actually do.
Yeah, and I have the picture on my mobile.
Yeah, and so, you know, I mean, in this respect, I think what's happening now, which you point out, very important, is the attempt to separate into, you know, this is us, this is not us. So in fact, in many respects, if for the kind of esoteric sect that you are talking about, it is more and more an ethnic marker rather than a religious. You know, the beliefs are not so much important. It's what you do and who you are that's important.
No, I totally agree. It's basically, it has to do with identity and identity politics.
Well, thank you very much. It was really fascinating presentation. And all the time I was thinking about what was happening in the Middle East, probably in the 3rd and 4th millennium BC. So the culture of using and reusing shrines is very part of the heritage of the population in the Middle East. So all the time, I mean, in the wars, if you win, you take over the temple of your enemy and you put your gods there and you start worshipping them and you build a narrative about them. And also, for example, in Ebla, in 4th millennium BC, that is known for putting figurines in the temples, the same, like very similar to the locks that we have in the shrines there, to prove to the gods that you are present all the time there. But really, is my question about the increase of the visiting the shrines. Is it related really to the wave of increase of religiosity in the Middle East that have been hitting for some time since probably the Iranian Revolution? And also, do you think that it is very much related to the more kind of internal religious politics rather than, so when you were speaking about the Mar Jurjus, for example, it is a way to shape or, let's say, define an identity for the Sunni community, saying like, as Dr. Zubaydah said, that we are not that, we don't do this and we don't do that. So it's more related to the process of constructing the identity rather than being kind of, I'm a proper Sunni or I'm a proper Shia.
No, I think it has more to do with, well, apparently there's some sort of search of who are we, and there are many ways to find out. The more identity markers, this is only one part of it. But you see that from the 90s onwards, shrine visit becomes more popular. And what you also see is that certain communities are a little bit delayed, and they are following others. So there are trends, definitely for the Alawite community, because of course we had great influx of Iranian pilgrims. I remember I was often in Damascus, where some hotels were always only to cater for the Iranian pilgrims. They saw them everywhere in the street. Today even more, I think, but at the time it was already a striking phenomenon. They did not as yet take over the Umayyad Mosque, as some claim they did sometimes. So, and then there were attempts. There was a sort of Iranian mission, Dawah, in the Alawite region. There was some support of it, but very little, and it evaporated very quickly. But it was one of the ways that it basically put religion on the agenda. And one of the responses is to stress your Alawiness, and you say, well, I'm not Iranian or Shiite, then to stress a little bit more what that is. And shrine visit is one of the options. Producing books is one of the options. So I think it's also that process. So for the other, and of course the other studies are in Hezbollah territory, the Qatari. Hezbollah is very much political organization. They allow for all sorts of practices. They basically don't care. Because religious people follow the ulama of Beirut when it comes to religious issues. But of course there's been a major influx of Iranian money and so forth. So, and of course in Iran, pilgrimage is so central. And that is really has also been exported to the area. So I think that's more mechanisms. But it's for some it will be very, very religious. For some it's perhaps less religious and it's more a social gathering. So depends.
Do we have any questions online? I think we've probably got time for, well, not really for one more, but if anybody's got a very quick question they'd like to ask. Yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Professor. I can see new examples of like religious syncretism, but I'm wondering. You said that several sects can go to the same shrine and like offer like prayers together. But I think if I'm Durzi, for example, if I'm Alawi, if I'm Ismaili, I have to like not have to like I would build the shrine and try to make my identity representative in the shrine itself, like visually at least to refer to me, like. Did you find any distinctions, for example, in
new shrines in order to create your own sacred space?
Yeah.
The first slide I showed, the Mishaf shrine, made by Mu'mini Ismailis, as they call themselves sometimes. And that is really an attempt to create their own sacredness. A specific, very small community, of course. And many shrines are over. Many shrines have extensions, but there are not that many really very new shrines, in the sense that newly created. Because sacredness is not something you can easily create always. And apparently, in the Shaf case, they have found some sacredness. And it may have been well beside the shrine earlier. It probably was. Because there are also a lot of shrines that were no longer functioning and were basically premises, basically badia, wastelands. But you will find some remains of a shrine and then you can rebuild it. That is something we will see. Of course, another way of having new shrines amongst the Arabic communities, that many of the mashayikh become saints. And you have saintly villages, and the number of shrines is as big as the number of houses. And some houses have simply a shrine attached to it. You find that, and then if someone dies, the most extraordinary example, of course, of the shrine created in Syria is the shrine in Qardaha, dedicated to Hafs al-Assad. And the more remarkable, the one who is dedicated to his mother. Excellent. Some pictures of it, but that is a different type of. They are certainly passing for it. So yes, there is a possibility to create your own sacred space. What you also do, that happens, for instance, in the Umayyad mosque. 12 Shiites have this sort of prayers out loud, whereas the Sunnis don't have that. And then they felt disturbed by all the Shiites making so much noise. So there are regulations, so there are barriers, time slots. So that is also a way to create separated access to sacredness, but it is in the same space.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. I think we've had a sort of taxonomy of shrines that has also helped to illuminate the role that shrines play and changing role that they play. And thank you all for the questions, which I think have underlined exactly these points. Thank you very much.